Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Fusion 360 live stream. I'm Wayne Griffenberg. I'll be your host today as we look at a deeper dive and talk about tool libraries inside of Fusion 360. So we're going to have these live streams each day. You're going to see our team, Brad and Jason and Tyler and Devin, as well as Alan, CJ, and Edwin and Jorge, who's going to be hosting on our electrical deep dives and other webinars that you're going to see throughout the course of the week. So today we're going to be focusing on CAM on Mondays, and today's our deep dive on tool libraries. One of the more important aspects of working in Fusion 360 is getting a tool library in your digital world inside of Fusion 360 to match what you really have in the real world in your machines. So it's an important piece. I know we see a lot of questions when we do our trainings and our live webinars as well as our deep dives directly with customers. So it's one place I think is great for us to focus and answer some questions. So please feel free. This is live. Devin is with me today, and he's going to be manning the questions inside of the YouTube Live. And so please feel free. Reach out, ask questions. We're here to answer those as well. So let's dive in. So this is our Fusion 360 interface, and as we had mentioned, one of the most important aspects of working in any CAD or CAM system, mostly CAD CAM, is creating those libraries. Not even creating, but being able to import them and add custom tooling that you have to those libraries. So we're going to cover those subjects today, but I'd like to go through the basics of what the tool library is about, how to navigate through the library, and how we can create and import tools. So let's go in and get started. So the first thing I'm going to switch over is to our manufacturing workspace. And in here, of course, we can do all of our 2D, 3D design for milling. We have turning where we can work with turning tools as well. Additives, so if you're doing 3D printing, you could set up your material database as well as your machines that you're going to 3D print. Probing, we have library tools that you can utilize for probing, as well as fabrication. You can always create and use tools for your water jet, laser, or plasma machines. Right? So let's dive in, and across the board for each one of these, you notice a theme for each of these tabs that I jump into inside the manufacturing workspace. We always have a link to this tool library, so you can always manage your library of tools. So let's dive in. So I'm going to click this tool library manager, and it brings us into this tool library. So initially, when you started design, this would start with a blank slate, right? In this case, I happen to have some tools that I was working with on this project. And the tools in that library would match the tools that I need to be able to put the toolpaths to cut those parts out. Now, initially, if you just start creating tools, it gets attached to a document. And that document happens to be the open document at the time. And if I start to add and populate tools for the toolpaths in that document, and then I close that document, these tools will stay with that document. Right? So the idea is to create a repeatable tool library that matches what's in the machine, not only for that job. So I just wanted to point out that clarity in the beginning so it makes it a little bit more clear. I know we talk to some customers who seem to have their tools disappear and they don't know where they go, especially new users who are starting to learn and understand the interface of Fusion. So let's go through this workflow, right? So let's look at the interface. So in the upper left-hand corner, right, just like the way we read, we start in the upper left-hand corner and work our way from left to right. So in this upper left-hand corner, we have our library tree. So just like you see in most tree style of like your browser tree, right, in Fusion 360, this works the same way. The logic is the same. You could turn that tree on and off, right? So if I just want to look at general materials all the way through all the projects and libraries, I could turn that tree on and off. And within the tree, you can see now we can turn and toggle our view of all those different tools on and off. So if I turn off the all function, you can only see what's highlighted in the local documents that I have open. If I toggle this back on, now I can see all the libraries that are within Fusion 360. Right? So you can even expand these down to look at the specific documents you have open. So if you have 4 documents open, you'll see all 4 of those different document libraries as far as tool libraries are concerned. Now, I'd like to just jump down to the bottom. I know sometimes it's funny to read from the bottom up, but let's go down to talk about the sample tools. And this is where I want to talk about this search capability right here. So if we go and expand down the sample tools, and in the sample tools, you see that Fusion has loaded, preloaded tools with these different materials. Now, these are materials that you would cut out of, right? So if I'm cutting brass or cutting aluminum or plastics, I can select the plastics library, and now it filters down on all of the tools that are inside of that plastics library for inch. We also have a plastics library for metric materials as well. So if I look at inch plastics, now I could filter down inside of this library, right? Instead of scrolling through the entire library, now we can use these filters to help us find what we're looking for. So going from left to right, let's say the first thing I'm doing is, if I'm going to make some holes, if I'm doing hole making, and if I filter on hole making and I say OK, you'll see it'll just filter on tools like drills and spot drills and taps and so forth. And you can see it also added a filter in here additionally. So let's say I want to filter on pocketing. So I can turn on the filter for pocketing. I say OK, and now it filters down those tools that make sense for pocketing. Right? So the next added layer of the filter would be, these are the different toolpaths that it's selected that make sense for pocketing. I can expand this library to ball mills if I'm looking for chamfer mills as well. And let's say we're not looking at tapered mills, I can change this filter, and now it filters down to those tools that match that search criteria. So if I'm looking under dimensions, now I can filter diameter, right? I can also filter on flute length. So if I'm looking for, let's say, tools that have a flute length between 3/4 and maybe 7/8, right? Now we can filter down on tools that fit that criteria. The next thing is I'm looking for tools that have, let's say, a specific text in it, right? So I'm only looking for tools that have in the description bullnose, and then it filters down on those tools. So from a large filter, you could have thousands of tools. Like I'm going to show you later on, we're going to import a Harvey tool library or helical, and then that'll have tons of tools, and you could filter down on specific text. So I just wanted to show you that's what this does as far as capabilities. And we can always back our way out, or I can hit the X and restart our filter. So that's the filtering tools, and we can see we have other tools in here as well, like probes, right? Probes and inches, and these are different probes from Renishaw, and I'll show you that under vendors in a second. We can also filter on taps and even turning tools, basic catalog tools for turning, right? So you could filter on those different tools from our samples library. And if we look at under vendors, our team has been adding different tool libraries as well as holder libraries specific to vendors. So if we look at the Albrecht library, we can see the Uberchucks, Maritool, we have our ER32, Cat40, Cat30 holders as well, and then or BT30, and then our Renishaw, you can see we've loaded up a lot of those optical probes that you can add to your library. And you can go into this library, right click, and copy that tool and bring it directly into your local library. And we'll show you how we can create local libraries as well. But I just wanted to show you that you have access to these different tool libraries directly in the vendors tab here. So now if I look at the local library, I'm going to expand down under local, and you can see I have a bunch of libraries in here that I created for different machines that we've worked on in the past, as well as some machines we created to help customers match their interface as well. So you can easily create libraries in here. So this is the Haas VF2 that we used at our Pier 9 facility in San Francisco, and some of these tools will match what's in that tool crib, and we could select those tools and work with them. Now, one thing I like to show you is how we can import or even create a new tool library. right? So in here, we're going to talk about creating tools, but let's say we want to make a new tool library for a machine we're working on. Recently, I was working with our team over at the Monctons Tools in Denver, right? So they are an HFO as well as other machine tool dealership, and they had a TMP2 that we were just populating some tools on. So I'm going to right click on this local library, and now we can add a new tool library. And the next function that's highlighted is import tool library. And I'm going to go through that in a second, but let's make a new tool library that matches that machine. Right, so this way, if you create a new tool library that matches your machine or your tool crib, this way you can populate that library with tools that make sense of what you actually have, and you can use those over and over again instead of recreating the wheel for every document you create. So I'm going to create a new tool library, and down here I'm just going to name this our Haas TM or tool room mill, and this will be our 2P Haas tool room mill 2P. So now I can start to populate it. We have a blank slate here. Right? I know it's still showing my probe because that's the last tool I highlighted, but let's create a new tool. Right, so let's walk through the creation of a new tool. So up here on the upper right, we have some capability of creating a new mill tool. We can create a tool holder, right? And we can also import tools from our tool holder vendor library as well. We can create a new turning tool, a new cutting tool for our laser, water jet, or plasma. And then I'm going to show you what the tool numbering does in just a moment. So let's create a new mill tool. So I'm going to select the new mill tool creation, and here it kind of walks us through this wizard, right? So the first thing is under general, we can start adding a description, right? So if this is like a, let's say Sandvik, or let's say helical, right? So this will be a helical, and I can start typing in, it's a quarter inch, rougher, and then if I could spell would be good. So a quarter inch rougher, we'll say for aluminum, inch, right? So I'm just being very basic, but you can make this specific to how you'd like the tool to be described. You can plug in, if this is a helical tool, I can plug in the helical name. And product ID would be the part number, so I can reorder this tool. And I can also put in a product link that I can click and bring me directly to the website so I can go and update my cart so I can order 10 of these if we need to. So you can plug in that information in our cutter. So we're going to make this a flat end mill, and it'll be a 3/8 end mill. We can start plugging in what our body length is, right? Our overall length. We'll keep that at 1 inch 7/8. Your shoulder length, what your flute length is, and then you can even say if you have an oversized, offset shoulder for your tool, right? So this will be a 2 flute end mill, carbide. So I'm just plugging in the aspects for the tool, and this helps with feed speed calculation so we know the number of tools and we know where our length is. So when we go to do a search later on, we can find on any of these fields. Right, so our shaft, we can plug in a specifics for our shaft if we have a specialty tool for putting into our collet. Our holders, we can create a new holder, or we can even select from those standard holder libraries that we talked about earlier. You can even import your own tool holder libraries as well. Right, so feeds and speeds, plug in those feeds and speeds that make sense for the machine that you're running, and uh, and make sure you check, your the catalog, check the feeds and speed calculation according to the manufacturer, and of course, you plug in feeds and speeds that you've proven out for your machine for that tool. And then for this tool, it's going to be tool number 1. We could choose our coolant. This number is our tool number. The length offset is in your table. According to tool number 1, this will be the length offset that you would call in the table for tool number 1. Same thing for your diameter offset, right? So often in the machines I ran, we've always kept this the same, but that's not the rule. You can always make a specific length offset for a specific set of tools, right? So, and then you can set those up independently. We can also turn on our coolant in here. So now I just created a tool. I walked through the wizard, created a new tool, and that's the tool we would use for the next job. That's our tool number one in this library for the Haas tool room mill. Right? So you can add holders, you can add other types of tools as well. Now I mentioned that we can import tool libraries as well. So if you don't want to start from scratch, and one tool I'd like to show you is importing a tool library from a catalog or from a customer. Now, one place I think would be helpful as you get started to learn about this process, and you might even use some of those tools we talked about, right? So I got to be able to spell. So if I wanted to bring in a helical tool library, right? So let's say we create a new tool library. And I'm going to call this one helical mills, right? So, or maybe we'll do Harvey. We'll bring in the Harvey uh, mills, right? So these are going to be Harvey N mills. And I'm just going to call it Harvey mills. And I want to be able to import a tool library directly into here. Now, I want to show you that you can get to these Harvey tools directly from our main website as well within Fusion 360. So I'm going to open up and let's say we jump into, there's our YouTube information. So let's say I want to jump into, this is our CAM post-processor library that you can find from the post-processor dialog inside of Fusion 360. And if you do a Google search for Fusion 360 libraries or post-processor library, you'll find that we have post-processors for all these different machines. Right? But we're not really focused on post processors today, but this is a really handy website and a handy library for you that you could filter on those different libraries. So if you want to be able to edit your post, we have a manual to do that. If you need support for your post, or if you want to go to one of our partners to get some help with your post, you can do that here. But again, I'm looking at tool libraries, but notice right up above that, you can see we have a catalog for posts as well as tools. So if we select the tools library, now you can see we now have specific tool libraries that you can import into Fusion 360 or HSM. Right, so Datron tools, Maritool holders, Harvey, helical tools. Right, so let's say we want to bring in this Harvey tool library for end mills. You can also go to the Harvey or helical website specifically into the catalog you're looking for, and you can download those tools. So let's say we want to bring these in to Fusion 360. So I'm going to select the link, and you can see it's downloading that tool library as a .json file. And we can import .json, we can import .tools, or HSM tool library as well. It looks like it completed. I can go and look in the folder, and I can see it downloaded into my downloads folder. So let's import that .json library into Fusion 360. Right, so if I jump into Fusion 360 under my new Harvey Mills um, library, and you can name this whatever you'd like, but I'm going to right click, and now I could choose a lot of different functions. But in this case, I want to import a tool library. I could select import, and it's bringing me through Windows, and I can jump into my downloads folder. And let's upload that .json. So here's the different types of tool libraries you can bring in. .tools, HSM lib, .json, and then a text delineated file, TSV. So let's bring in the .tools library. I just select it, open, and it's going to import directly into my tool library. There's all the Harvey tools. I need to do a little bit of setup just to make sure, and I can do a search in here as well, but I can see there's different tools have been imported, like a lot of tools are imported into this library. And I can pick out specific ones, right? So for different jobs, if I need to go and call up, let's say, I'm going to filter, right? So let's say I want to grab like a 3/16 or maybe even a 3/8 flat mill, right? Or maybe even a ball mill. I can use my tool library, my filters, and I can filter down the tools for pocketing. I can filter down on, let's say, ball and bull nose mills, maybe even flat. Right, so now it filters down on those different tools. I could filter down, and remember, we can do this from diameter, and I'm looking for a 3/8 inch diameter tool. filters down even more, and I could see it filtered on all those 3/8-inch diameter tools. And if I'm looking for a specific tool, and I can even remember, I know I was working with a quarter radius end mill, right, or a bull nose with a certain quarter radius, we can plug that in as far as dimensions are concerned as well, right? So if I'm looking for specific text, I'm looking for bull nose, like we did before, and now it'll filter down on those 3/8 bull nose tools that I can call up the one I'm looking for. Right, so now I can bring that tool, I can use that in a job, I can copy it, right? So I can copy it and I can bring it into our Haas TM2 and paste it, and now I have that Harvey tool that I'm going to use in my Haas TM2. It's just a matter of right click, edit the tool, and I can start to populate that tool with the different information as far as like feeds and speeds specific for the job that I need it to be, right? So now I'm able to work with those Harvey tools in a library. Right. So another question that a customer had asked a while ago, not too long ago, but can I bring in, like if I'm coming from another CAM system, can I import a tool library, like in other words, MasterCAM, right? So we have a tool, and I'd like to show you. You can import tools for tool libraries from other CAM systems. We have a tool that was developed. There's a gentleman, Matt Nichols, in our team. Matt is a wizard when it comes to programming and automation, and he created a tool that we had uploaded into our Fusion um, apps and add-ins and scripts. So if we look at utilities right in here, we can see we have some ways to work with add-ins, right? Scripts and add-ins. So if you go down to Fusion 360 App Store, and in our App Store, there's a tool that you can download for free. So if I look under CAM, there's a tool in here which is your post-processor, or not post-processor, your tool library import, and I think it's on the second page, but you can do a search for this as well. And there's a tool for importing tool libraries, right? So I was just looking it up earlier, and I can even say import. Here it is, CAM Tool Library Converter, right? So if you look at this, I'm going to download it. It's only available for Windows, but you can download this tool converter, and you can convert tool libraries. So I added it into my process. So under milling, if I look under manage, now I have this milling tool conversion that we can use, right? So I'm going to open this up. It opens up our windows to locate the tool library. I happen to have a MasterCAM, one of my old MasterCAM tool libraries on my desktop. So in here I have an old mill inch tool database from MasterCAM. I can open it up. It brings me through this wizard, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to say old MCAM tools, and you can call it, as you need, but it's going to add into my library. It knows that I'm converting from a MasterCAM library. And now it's going to convert, or it's going to give me an error. But I did this earlier, and it would convert that tool. Normally, it doesn't give me an error, and it creates a tool library. It may be because I already have that tool library in my history in here. So let me see if I can rename it and bring it in. But that's the process that you would go through to import those tool libraries. We'll give it another go real quick. So let's say manage milling tool libraries. We're going to grab that MasterCAM library off of my desktop. Open. I'm going to try to name it something else. I'm just going to say old tools, and we'll see. All right, it's giving me an error, but I did this actually this morning before our live web. So let's try one more thing too, just to show you. I can also do this. I can say for now, in my scripts, I can turn this off. This is our scripts and add-ins where you can start add-ins and turn them off. So in here, if I go down to Tool, let's stop that for now because maybe something's running in the background that's kind of stuck in memory, right? So I'm going to restart that tool, right? So I'm going to go back into milling, and we'll try this one more time. So I'm going to go into, grab that library. We'll go to my desktop, open that up. We're going to call this one our old MCAM. Let me make it one word, old underscore MCAM. Okay. Now, in the background, it didn't really show us anything, but if I go into our tool library, now if I look at old MCAM, there is the tool library right here, and it imported those tools from my old MasterCAM library. I could see the different tools it brought in. It didn't bring the holder geometry, but I can easily go in and add that information as well. I think it's because my old library didn't include any tool holder info. But you can always populate that, and if you do have a library that has tool holder info, you can bring that in as well. Right? So you can import tool libraries from another CAM system. So what I'd like to walk through, so we did the importing and we can also export as well. So if I want to share a tool library, let's say we created that, and I only have one tool, but let's say in my Haas TM2P, I have two tools in there. And let's say I want to share this library with somebody on my team or somebody outside of my team. I can always right click and choose Export Tool Library, and we could save that tool library as different types as well. So now we could share a tool library if you want to share with your team. This leads me to another aspect of working with Fusion 360 and using tools that you can take advantage of on the cloud. So if you're working with a team and a lot of our customers, especially professional, are working in teams so that each person in the team can design, multiple people can program, and you can work on assemblies at the same time. You could share the same tool library. Especially if you have a bunch of Haas machines that basically share the same tool libraries, you can make this what's called a cloud library. And in the cloud library, you can expand this out to be able to create your tools in the cloud library that you could share with your team. Now, some of you are probably looking at your tool library and not seeing a cloud library in here, especially if you're working in Fusion Team. What I'd like to do is take a second to show you how to enable the cloud library so that you can work together with your overall team. So if you don't see the cloud library, this is what you can do. If you go up under your name in the upper right and under your preferences, now your team would have to do this as well. Right, so if you don't see that cloud library under the shared there, bring in your preferences and go under manufacture and enable cloud libraries. So enable this tool, which will turn on the capability of sharing tools and tool libraries with your entire team. Okay, so enable cloud libraries, you hit OK, and what that's going to do in the background in your data panel, and in the main data panel, it's going to turn on the functionality of using an assets folder under your libraries. So when you see the assets folder, this is where you could share tool libraries, tool templates, right? Toolpath templates, your settings, your post processors, the machine definitions, and also in the future, we're going to have nesting capability, and you'll be able to share that as well. So this is where your team will be able to get those shared assets inside the assets folder. So that will enable in your tool library this cloud library tool. So now you can create a cloud library like you see here for our Haas VF2. Start to populate it with tools. You can even import and copy tools. You can create them from scratch and work with those tools directly. And now each of your team will share the same library inside the cloud library. Now, as we started off, we started talking about the tools in our documents, right? In our local documents, we have our cloud libraries, and as I select through here, you see it just highlights on those specific features within the or tool libraries inside of those different documents. So one thing I wanted to show you, and I didn't go through creating all these, but one thing I'd like to show you is in this document that I'm working on, in here, if you notice, I have some tools that I set up previously that kind of match some of, not kind of, they did match tools that would be in the tool crib that we could share across different machines. Notice in here we have some tools, like I have two tool number ones, right? So they can't both occupy the same pocket in the machine, in this case for this job. Right, so I have two tool number fives, right? So I have a tool up here, a 6 millimeter ball. Down here I have a tool number 5, right? So if I click, I can filter and not filter, but I can see them according to those different tools. Now, in some cases, it makes sense. I'm just going to renumber these, right? So when I have them in my tool or if I'm setting up a job and I have them in the pockets of the machine, I can renumber them accordingly. So up here, this 1, 2, 3 is a function where you can renumber those tools to make sense for the different jobs you're working on. Right, so in here we could choose to match whatever number will be for our diameter offset, our tool length offset like we were showing when we created a tool, as well as your compensation offset. Right, so in this case, there'll be number 1. We can also, for specific tools, we can say I want to keep a specific number and then orient those, right? So in this case, I'm going to say I want to go from first tool number and I want to offset, and we'll do every one initially, right? So I'm going to say, okay, it renumbers our tools, so now we have specific tools that are now in order, right? And you can select these according to the operation. You can select them according to the tool numbers in the list. So now let's say in one machine, I used to use this. Um, we used to have a multiple head router, Heian routers, and they had 4 main routers and 2 piggybacks. And there were specific tools that we could use for the offsets because the main head routers used to have different offsets. So you couldn't put those same tool in one head in another, or else you would crash, or you'd have to make multiple duplicate libraries. So what we used to do is we used to number them. So for all tools in head number 1, I would say 101, start with 101 to 151, or let's say tool number 150. So we'd have 49 tools, right, or 50 tools. You can make it 151. In this case, I would say increment those by 1, however many tools there were. And I can have for the first number being head 1, and I'd have tool number 1. So if I renumber them, now I have tools that I know are going to be in head 1 for the first digit was 1. I can select another set of library tools, and I can say these are, or say these are going to be part of 200, and we're going to increment them by, let's say, 150, or let's say increment them by 1, right? So we'd start with 200, and now the 200 bank of tools are going to fit in head number 2. So there's different ways that you can use this to your advantage to auto number those tools to match the different machine aspects. In this case, head number 2, head number 3, and so forth. So just to give you an idea of what that tool does, right? It renumbers your tools. So what I'd like to do now is kind of get into the capability of creating custom geometry tools. This is another project, and another question that pops up often is creating, like I have the standard tool geometry, and if I edit a flat mill, perhaps I even have the capability of doing radius mills. So I have a shape in here for a radius, but what if I have a combination of like a ball on the bottom, radius, and maybe a flat? Right? So there are tools, especially when you work with routers and woodworking, that you can have specific grind tools that you can purchase that have multiple features, but we don't really have that built into standard tools within Fusion. So what I would do is create specific geometry tools, right? And I'm going to walk you through that process. So let's jump and switch gears and get into more custom tool and form tool manufacturing. So I'm going to switch over to another project I was working on. So this group of good-looking people are our team at the Denver office for sales, right? So that's our Fusion 360 team, a good-looking bunch. Um, and so I'm not going to point out which one is me, but just for instance, I'm the bald guy with the gray beard. So that's our team. Like I said, a good-looking bunch. They're awesome people. So I'm lucky every day to work with such a great bunch of people at the team. So but I'd like to focus in on the frame, right? So I have a little picture frame here, and taking a closer look at what that frame looks like is we have some geometry. It's a neat looking frame, but this is one, let's say we do over and over again, right? So I have this outside profile of the frame, and in here, I'd like to look at this specific profile. So when I used to make up frames like this, I used to use multiple tools, right? So as you would imagine, if I jump into manufacture here, and for the first, I'd use like a bull nose mill to kind of get that radius cut. And then I would come in with a radius mill to be able to do this edge and get that radius in there. And then I would jump in with a flat mill to get that flat corner. So that's three tools, three setups, three paths, and sometimes it will be time consuming, and also it takes time to change out those tools, especially for some of us who don't have an automatic tool changer yet, right? So there's a project that I'm working on with my son. We have a small router in our garage, and he's enjoying it and learning and loving this, but it takes time to swap out a tool, right? You have to reset and all that. If we had one tool that can do that whole profile and we can do it over and over again and make a lot of different frames, that would be awesome to combine each of these different geometry. Now, there is a tool, a standard tool that you can find in your hardware shops that have these contours and specific shapes that you can buy and purchase and use. So if I want to make a tool that matches that shape, I can use what's called a form mill. So inside of here, we're going to walk through a process of how to make a form mill like the one you see on the screen, one that matches this shape. So I'm going to jump into our design real quick. And in this case, I happen to use a sketch and this is an assembly. In my picture frame, I have a sketch that I used to create the geometry of the frame and just kind of swept that around for the frame, right? So we could see, that geometry looks like this, which basically makes up the frame. And I have this feature here. So I'd like to use that feature to drive a tool. So I have exactly the shape of tool I'm looking for. So in my main assembly, I'm going to create a sketch in here. Looks like I already did it earlier. So let's start from scratch for you guys, right? So in here on this plane, I'm going to create a new sketch. And you can see, oh, that's editing this sketch. I want to create a new one. So let me go back on that plane. Actually, I can pull it out of here, right? So let's say we grab that front plane in here. And I'm going to create a sketch on that. I grabbed the wrong plane. Sorry, guys. Let me grab this plane. There we go. XY is this plane. There we go, XZ. So let's create a sketch on my XZ plane. And I want this geometry, so I'm going to project it into this new sketch. So I can do this I can hit the P key on my keyboard. I can also project that geometry just simply by selecting this geometry. Right, so this is the profile that I want in my sketch. I can, of course, just draw this up from scratch, but I just want to show you some ways they're going to match that. And if that profile changes, I can get an update according to the tool. So now if I take a closer look at what that looks like. So there's my sketch. I'm going to hide the old sketch. And while we're here, let's draw in the rest of the profile for that tool. So this is going to be 2 inches high. So I'm just going to type in 2. And then I'm going to continue drawing in the tool. So I'm going to have a 3/8 radius shaft, right? So I'm going to make this, nope, sorry, 0.1875. There you go. And then we're going to finish off what this tool profile is going to look like. So now I have a closed region. We can use that now as a tool profile to make the specific tool for that profile that I'm trying to cut in this design or in this part. So now let's go into our manufacturer workspace. Let's stay in that view over here. So I have my other tool paths. I'm not too worried about those, but I'm going to make a new one for this tool. And now let's go and create under our tools or manage tools. We're going to create a new form mill. And in the workflow here, right, so in this wizard, the first thing I want to do is select a tool profile. So let's expand down where I created the sketch for this, and I'm going to turn on that tool profile. I could just simply select the geometry right from here. My tool axis is going to be along that center axis, and I want to point this axis so it's up directly up at the tool. Right, so my compensation point, I can select, let's say, this edge, right? So I can compensate, so I would select this geometry to cut, I would compensate from that edge. So if I want to add any tool wear, it would compensate from this, or you could select this edge here, whatever makes sense for where you're trying to compensate in your geometry and in your part. So I'm going to select this edge. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to select down here along the ball, because that makes a little bit more sense if I look at this from a point of view of a ball mill, right? So we'll say okay, and I know now I have that profile. We can turn that profile off in our sketch. And now if we look under our document, right? Oops, let me go up to my tool library. we now have a form mill that has been added into this document, right? So there's my document, there's my form mill. You can see the profile, right? It put my offset way up here, so I want to go back and fix that. I think I might have selected it wrong, but let me go back and edit that tool, right? So now I want to go through and I want to populate this tool to match what I need for this job, right? So this one will have two flutes, and my diameter's there. My tip offset should also be our offset to our radius compensation. And then I can put in a specific shaft. If I want to select the holder, I can select the holder. Let's say I'm going to run this at 18,000 RPM, which is kind of fast, but we're going to do it anyway. And let's say our ramp speed is going to be something like 5 grand, and we're going to put in, let's say 100 inches per minute. So in here we can start to populate the tools. Now don't take these verbatim. I didn't select a specific material, right? So it really depends on what you're trying to cut and what types of materials that you're cutting and the material of a tool and so forth. So have your specific feeds and speeds that make sense for the job you're doing. This will be tool number 1 for this job, and I can also put in our air blast, or if we don't need coolant, and I'm just going to use my vacuum to suck up the chips. Right? So we went through the library like we were creating a brand new tool. There's our form mill, right? And now we can select that form mill out of the job we want to do, right? So if I close out our library, and now I want to be able to do a contour around here, right? So now let's go and do a 2D. Oops, we have to do a 2D contour. Here we go. And I'm going to select the tool. I'm going to use that form mill out of our library. And I'm going to select the geometry I want to cut. Now I'm thinking about where I did my compensation offset, which is basically the top of this edge right here, right? So I want to select the top edge of my geometry, like that. And that's where I set my compensation point. If I would have set it up here, I would grab this geometry, if I set it in a different way. So now I can set up, our heights, how far we want to lift, if we want to avoid any clamps that's holding down the geometry or holding down the part. And I can also do our passes, so you could set up, if you want to set your compensation up a little bit further for wear, right? And then our lead in, lead out. It's going to say OK. And then we get our contour with our new form tool. So I look at it from the side, and you can see as I start to simulate and play through, you can see it now matches that profile geometry that we're looking to cut. So now you can make custom shape tool, and you can populate that tool with the different aspects of what you're trying to make. And now I'm able to follow that profile. In this case, if I was making this all out of one piece, that would be pretty cool. And then if you'd imagine, I can make a smaller frame, then a smaller frame, then a smaller frame out of one piece of material, right? So that's one way. I know a lot of people would make just one side frames, then you'd make your top and put them together in a miter box. But again, however you like to work, you can always make your custom tooling match exactly what you have in your machine. All right, so that's a way to work with a form mill. Um, that's a popular tool to be able to add to your tool library, and so hopefully that's been helpful to be able to do that. That's pretty much what I wanted to go through with you guys, is showing you, and then we can recap, right? So I wanted to give you a tour of what the tool library looks like, how to walk through and being able to search specific tool libraries on operation types, dimensions, or specific text. You can populate different libraries. You can create libraries right inside of this browser library view. You can import tool libraries from other CAD systems, as well as import libraries that are available from tool manufacturers, and even ones you can pull off of our main website for Fusion 360. You can work and renumber your tools inside of your tool library to match what your requirements are for your machine. And we walk through different ways of creating those tools, how to create a custom tool to add to your library as well, and also turning on the capabilities of sharing your tool libraries on the cloud, right? Backing up your tool libraries and sharing them with your team. So one admin can create the library, maintain it while the rest of the team is able to use it for the different machines in your shop. So with that, that is pretty much what I'd like to show you guys today. I want to leave some room for questions. I know we have Devin, who is manning our Fusion or our Fusion Live right now, and I know Devin is a wizard when it comes to a lot of what we can do in tool libraries as well as overall CAM, and I'm sure he's answering a lot of your questions. So I'm kind of tuning in with Devin to see if there's any outstanding questions that we can help with. Um, but it looks like there's no outstanding questions now. It looks like Devin's really on top of handling a lot of your questions. And again, hopefully this has been helpful, especially to those new to Fusion 360 and learning how to work through and get into Fusion 360 to make it work for you and match what you guys have. Awesome. So Devin just gave me a thumbs up. He let me know we're all good. There's no outstanding questions from anyone, but please feel free. We're available. You can always reach out through this YouTube channel. There's a plethora of information. You'll have live streams that we've done in the past and a library of a lot of training and um, overview as well as deep dives that you can always go and find answers. Stay tuned over the next few weeks. In fact, over the next couple months, we do have a lot of really good um, overviews and deep dives coming up for you. Let me just share real quick on the screen. So we, oops, so you guys should be able to hear me. On the screen, do have a timer on here. Don't worry about the timer. But so on the screen and in this banner, you see that we have um, each day of the week, we're going to have these live workflows for you guys. So please tune in, right? So on Tuesday, we're going to dive deeper into engineering and design and engineering with Tyler, Jason, and myself. Getting into a lot of those design aspects, working with your assemblies, setting up parts and sketching. And Jason's got a series on a deep dive in sketching and good overviews that'll really help you out with some tips and tricks and tools that you can use for sketching. For electronics, we do have our electronics team, Edwin and Jorge, who are going to be with you every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And they're going to walk you through the basics and steps of getting up to speed with electronics, which is now completely inside of Fusion 360. And then Thursdays, Brad has projects. He's working on some optical and laser injection molded as well as assembly, electronic assembly, and putting it all the pieces together. So he's got an ongoing project, and you can check that out with Brad on Thursdays. And then Fridays we have our CAM hangout with CJ and Al, and we have a lot of our extended teams out there, not only within Autodesk, but a lot of our power users are chiming in and they're jumping in the Hangout and giving some tips and tricks and some overview of what they do every day. So I highly recommend jumping in and being part of our weekly live stream and within our live stream schedule. So, with that, I appreciate you guys coming out. I appreciate your being part of our live stream, and hopefully this has been helpful. And as I had mentioned, please feel free at any time reach out to our team through YouTube or through this channel and ask your questions, and we're available and get answers out to you guys every day. So with that, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. Again, tomorrow you're going to see a lot more on the design side within Fusion 360. Stay tuned with us. So we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining. Bye, everyone.